In the previous section we created this page which allows us to amend our referee's details, specifically the referee's name. If we had any other details stored in our database for the referee, we would also add elements to amend those details as well. But as it works out, the referee's name is the only detail that we actually store. The same is true for the players, who are going to be the focus of this video. And we're going to actually go through and create a version of this specific to the players. In the previous video we created this stretch referee edit template, which is actually going to contain all of the same information which our players are going to store as well, specifically just the player's name. And so in the interest of reusing code, we can make this a template more abstract and use the same template for both the players and the referees. So for example, we're going to replace referee name with person name. We're going to replace referee's name with just name. And we're going to replace referee pretty much throughout with person. So we have person ID as well as the person name. This also means that we need to change the attributes we're passing across. So we will have person name as well as person ID. And to complete the process, we also need to replace the name of the element from stretch referee edit to stretch person edit, which also means we need to rename the file itself. The folder. As well as in the actual referee edit page, we need to change the name of the template to match our new template name. We also need to go ahead and rename the attributes so that they correspond to our newly renamed attributes, as well as renaming the template here. If we go back across to our browser and refresh the page, we can see that everything's going to still work exactly as it is. We do however need to go in to our referee model and change the data which is posted across, because it's no longer going to be called referee name and referee ID, it's going to be called person name and person ID. We will call our variables the same thing because in this instance it contextually makes sense. Now that we have abstracted this class from being specific to a referee, we can go ahead and copy the edit page across to our player folder. And close out of the previous version which was specific to the referee. We're going to rename all of the final instances of referee into player, because contextually this is going to make sense again. Because when we run our select query in a moment, this is actually going to be the data that's returned to us. In our player controller, we're going to need to add a new index for our edit page, and we can copy this directly across from our referee version, because we're going to want the exact same functionality. We will however rename referee ID into player ID. And we will also need to go ahead and create some new functions. So we're going to update the player data, not the referee data. And we're going to get the player data as well. Finally, we're going to render the player version of the edit page. So if we go ahead into our Stretch League class, we can basically duplicate these final two classes, or rather these final two methods, and again replace referee with player. So we're going to get the player data, and we're going to update the player data. We can also rename the referee ID into player ID, as well as renaming the referee ID and the referee name into player ID and player name in this update method. You can see here, however, that we already have a method called getPlayerData, and so I'm going to rename this getPlayerEditData, and we'll go back and update that in our controller straight away. Next up, we're going to need to edit our select statements so that they refer to the correct data. So we're going to select the player ID and the player name from our player table, where the player ID is the specified player ID. And again, we're going to limit this to one instance. In our update player table, we're going to update the player name, where the player ID is equal to the player ID. And that's also going to be the player table. So if we jump back across to our browser and change referee to player, we can see that we're going to get this error. And this is because we should have called this function from within our model, not outside here, which we haven't done yet. So if we go into our player model, we're going to need to create this data. And we will keep this renamed as getPlayerEditData to avoid confusion. Again, because we're always going to create this new instance, we're going to create a constructor to handle this for us. And we're going to create a private variable here as well. And so we can replace this version with the version that we're going to create up here. In our player edit data screen, we're going to pass across the player ID, which we're also going to need to pass across into this method from our controller, which we have done here. So if we go back across to our browser now and refresh again, we're going to get our page. You can see that we're not actually getting any name output, which we would expect to see. If we go back across the NetBeans, however, we can see that we're still referring to referee ID here instead of the player data. So now that we've made that change, we can go ahead and refresh our browser again, and the information is going to show across correctly. If we make some changes to this, we can try and insert the data. We don't have this class created in our model, and so we can go ahead and do that now to tie this end up. So in our model, we just need to create the public function, update player data, and we're going to need to go ahead and whitelist the information as we did in our previous section. So we can basically copy this across from here. So we're going to have the player ID and the player name, which is going to be passed across as person ID and person name. We're then going to create this instance of the method update. This will be player data, which has already been created in our Stretch League class with the 2 parameters provided. So if we go back across to our browser one more time and refresh our page and continue, it's going to submit the form for us. And as you can see, we're not getting any error messages now. The error message that you did see when the page was reloading was simply because of the data already stored in the page. By clearing out the session, by refreshing the page completely, we're able to remove that error message. In the next section, we're going to go ahead and create the selection page, which we're going to use to actually select which players are eligible to play in each specific fixture. This is going to be more complicated than the edit page that we've just been creating, both for the referee and for the player, because we're obviously going to be dealing with a lot more data. So make sure you subscribe so you can see how we're going to handle this. Refresh our page. You can see that our available players are all listed here. We don't have any players selected for this fixture yet, which is why no fixtures or no players are displayed over here yet. But as I did say, this is currently listing all of the team players, whereas we only want to select the available players.